Welcome back to Grand Theft World Podcast. Tonight's guest is musician, media mogul, Gareth Icke. Gareth, how are you doing this evening?
I'm great, thanks, mate. I've never been called a mogul in my life.
Well, you're second generation freedom fighter. I like to look at the world that what we're up against is a multi-generational group of serial killers. And what you've got there is multi-generational freedom fighters. So you're fighting back, grassroots. You don't have any billionaire funding. You went from your prodigious musician career and you've refocused over the last couple of years on Ickonic Media. And you've got you got like a stable of talent over there, just producing and putting out all this great content. How did that come about? What made you think you could do something like that? And why didn't it exist before you guys did it?
Good question. Basically, my brother is the businessman. He's the brains and in the business sense. And so, I was up for launching a podcast and kind of having conversations with people, coming at it from a slightly, maybe a younger angle, which I might not look at the minute, but I am a bit younger. And he was like, kind of, why don't we just launch a channel? Which to me was like, okay, that's a pretty big leap, but yeah, why not? There's nothing out there that's doing that at the moment, so we'll go for it. And we launched the channel, and then COVID, kind of all that nonsense happened when the channel was really in its infancy, and that I think just concentrated everyone's minds. Then that was kind of like, when you're seeing what's happening in terms of, I don't know how it was over there, but here in the UK, Boris Johnson would stand at 5 p.m. every weekday and would give this speech, and he'd go to the scientist, next slide please, and all this sort of nonsense. And it was just absolutely ridiculous how you had this whole room full of media and no one was asking these questions. And so I was watching it, and he would trip himself up because Boris Johnson is a buffoon, and he would trip himself up, and I'm like Laura Kunzberg or someone from the BBC is going to jump in now, they've got to, because he's literally like, no question. Okay. And then they do it again and do it again. And I realized actually these people are literally, they're not asking the questions that not even, other sort of, journalists or investigative journalists or whatever would be asking. These are questions that, John down the pub would ask. These are just real obvious questions. And they weren't being asked. And it was like, do you know what? They're not going to do it. It's all well and good slagging off the mainstream media, but you can whinge about it till the cows come home. They're not going to change because they are what they are. So we'll launch our own, basically. And that was what we did. And it's just grown and grown. And I think there's more of an appetite for it now. And also, the more content that we've made that have pointed out things, I think back now, occasionally, like if my wife goes away, I might stick on an old episode of Right Now or whatever from, 6-7 months ago. And you're saying stuff and you're talking to guests that are saying what's coming. And then I'm coming forward to now, and it's like, this is exactly what they said would happen, and so that gives you credibility. It gives the channel credibility, and I think that's why people are interested now. People want to know what's going on because they know they're being lied to. They just don't know to what level, basically.
Right. I think COVID was this great switch, and it's like people now know they're being lied to, but they don't know the history of who, what, where, when, why, and how. And to my point of the multi-generational serial killers, let me see if this button will work for me. Oh, no, I gotta hit this. I gotta hit one button here. Pardon my French. Deactivate, activate. No, that's not it. I'm gonna have to play with that in a second. I have a book here, Agenda 21. Boris Johnson's dad helped to create Agenda 21, and the narrative that Boris, the buffoon, is there then to manage in the second generation of their anti-freedom cult. Let's just call it like that, right? Anti-freedom cult. So for years and years, researchers have been trying to communicate to the public globalism. There's a group of people, they seek kind of a medical martial law situation. They write scenarios and do exercises and, all these sort of things. And nobody could hear us. Nobody could hear us. We were like voices in the forest and there's no one around. But all of a sudden with COVID, everybody's tuned in. Like, there's something going on. What is the history? Who are these people? How long has this been going on? How far are they? What is this World Economic Forum thing? What is the Club of Rome? What is this population agenda? What is, all these sort of things. And now you guys have like the magnet to bring all that content together to help people digest, understand, cognize this ever changing, ever increasing tension situation that they've brought upon us in the past couple of years. So it's like, just when the lights go out, you guys invented the flashlight, and you're like, look, we can see, and now it's like a million candle power floodlight. And you're like, we can really see now. Right. And you guys just keep attracting more talent and growing your audience. So talk about some of the freedoms that gives you as a producer and as a platform, not to have corporate sponsorship or billionaires telling you what to do. Talk about the type of freedom that you get from doing business directly with your audience.
Well, there's one question before
for sure.
Before we publish anything on the show or put anything on the show, is this true? And if the answer is yes, then we go with it. And that's the beauty of it. It's not a case of, is this true? Yeah, it is, but this is going to cause some issues down the road with X, Y, and Z. For instance, the subscriber model is perfect because we're answerable to no one at all apart from the subscribers. And so, if you have sponsorship or you rely on advertising, you're for instance, a show like right now where you get a lot of whistleblowers that are telling you, what's going on in certain aspects, particularly in the medical industry, but in arms and in technology and everything, social media. You could have a very real possibility that a whistleblower comes on the show and wants to expose your biggest sponsor, in which case you're in a difficult scenario because you're like, obviously I want to expose them because they've done bad stuff, but then the channel dies. If the channel dies, then you can't expose anyone else. And so you kind of would have that conversation with, what we're going to do. Whereas we will never have that because we simply don't have advertising. It's purely subscriber based. We know every month how many subscribers we've got, which means how much money is coming into the channel, which then means what can we make? Can we commission documentaries this month? Can we do this? Can we do that? Because obviously there's no shareholders or anything like that. And so it gives you a great freedom, mate. Like when I book guests up for right now, I don't think about anything. I don't think, like a lot of, like say YouTube channels they'd worry, like for my dad, for instance, you have my dad on your show, that show will get deleted and you'll get a strike. Full stop. I get people now will ask me, you need to get your dad on my podcast, and I'm like, well, where'd you host the podcast? It's like YouTube. I was like, but you host it somewhere else as well? No, YouTube. Like, mate, honest. Well, I can ask, and there's a couple of times it's happened, and they've emailed me going, "Oh, the thing's been deleted after 2 hours." I'm like, 2 hours, mate? You did it right. You did it right. 2 hours. They're getting slow, mate. And so they would have to worry about who they're having on their show, whereas I don't. I will literally interview anyone, and they can say what they like as long as it's true, or as long as they can provide evidence that it's true.
Well, and the ability to have that freedom to say, I can give you a platform so you can speak truth to power was never more essential than during the pandemic, where you had all these doctors and medical people trying to speak out. YouTube, Facebook, it was all lockstep in censorship, right? And it happened back in the day with your dad and Alex Jones, and they're like, oh, they're talking about crazy stuff, we can censor them. But then it trickles down to they're censoring people on the left now. They're censoring whatever they find inconvenient because they're trying to maintain a narrative that is fictional, and that always needs artificial buoyancy. That needs censorship, and the censorship comes in like carpet bombing before they send in the infantry of propaganda. Because if they have dissenting voices, people push back against the propaganda. But if they can silence people like your dad and silence people like the doctors you've had on your platform, then people are basically under control. Whether they assume or they follow authority or they just don't have access to the information, they're under control. And so it's a liberating experience, not only, I'm sure, as an entrepreneur, but for your audience, because this refreshing, invigorating, inventive content is coming together, because you have to create a place artificially for these doctors to speak now. The other places and platforms, they were persona non grata, right? So it was like a perfect storm of, there's this tragedy and we can leave it like that and let everything be censored, or you can create something on your own, bring the hope into the situation, get people involved, and give them, not telling them what to think, but here's a couple things. If you're going to learn how to think, you might want to consider this raw data and cognize it and process it yourself, make your own decisions, right? So really, I see what you guys are doing as giving people freedom back. And an example of the case you cited was, you don't want to have sponsors tell you what you can and can't publish. Well, that happens here in America for sure. And the evidence is that it was NBC did that whole Epstein interview, the expose, and then Buckingham Palace called them and said, you can't run that story. And they sat on it. And then once the Epstein thing popped, that reporter was caught on tape saying, we had that years ago, but we weren't allowed to run it. There was that whole expose. So that definitely, that situation that you're trying to avoid is the status quo here. They will get you like that. And if they can't, then they just censor or delete. But you guys found the independence mode of, we can put technology together and connect it to the web, make an offer that's hard to refuse, right? You guys do the 7-day free trial, and then it just gives people a sample. It's like 7-day free trial on Netflix, same thing, right? Yeah. Only you're the freedom equal and opposite to like the Netflixy type stuff out there. It's substantial, meaningful, thoughtful content.
Yeah, and there's something for everyone, and it's something that I found like over the last couple of years. Going to protests down in London, and that was incredible, by the way, mate. The speed in which that grew, because people started to realize very quickly that they were being lied to, and they couldn't really figure it out. And a lot of people didn't really want to cross the Rubicon to actually, this is being done intentionally. A lot of people clung to this kind of, politicians are kind of incompetent. And then they would look around at all these other politicians, and then, you start pointing stuff out to people about the World Economic Forum and how they're all young global leaders. And hang on a minute, this, and so these protests swelled. I mean, there's one in London, it was about 600 people, which weren't bad. And then I think it was the following month, it was about 45,000. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, we're on it now. And it went up to best part of 1 million in the end. And it pushed back on a lot of what the UK government was trying to do. It made a difference, absolutely made a difference.
And if I might just add, it inspired us around the world, because when I saw that trying to pop off over there, I'm like, we'll see how that goes. But then when they had like the one with like 50,000 people, and I see your dad out there talking, I'm like, oh, it's going on. People are getting it. And they can finally hear someone like him clearly, right? It's not like a hypothetical, entertaining thing that's no longer touching you. It had touched everybody at that point. And some people were smart enough to be like, I want to know more.
Well, that's the point. Like what you were saying, how people are COVID was a kind of a trigger for people to wake up. And I think it's because it touched everyone in one way or another. It affected them, even if it was, the government not allowing them to see a dying relative. I mean, it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is. If the state tells you can't see your relative to say goodbye, you're going to have an issue with that. And so it was affecting everyone. Sticking masks on kids, it shouldn't, again, matter what your political persuasion is. Like, that's just freaking wrong, man. And so people started to ask a lot of questions, and the answers that they were being given by the state were just factually inaccurate. They were just nonsense, and they didn't tie in with people's life experiences. So I don't have a TV license, and I don't watch mainstream media, I don't watch telly because of better things to do. But I couldn't understand how a certain amount of people at first, at least, just weren't getting it. They weren't getting it. It was extraordinary. People were staying locked down in their houses, and I was making the point, if I was going out more times a day, I was making a point, like, I would nip to the shop to get something, and then I'd come back and I'd nip to the shop to get something else. And Jen was going, you do realize you can just get more than one thing? I'm like, nah, because they've told me I'm staying in, which means I'm going out. I'll go out as many times as I want. And the local play park, they put all, tape all around the railings of the play park so the kids couldn't get in. No chance, mate. Just ripped it all off. Daughter on a swing. I'm not having it. And then more people started seeing that and doing the same and going, well, hang on a minute, actually, it doesn't really add up, actually, because what I'm being told and what I'm seeing aren't the same thing. There's not dead bodies everywhere like there were in China and India. Only 2 places people dropped dead, apparently, from COVID. But I had to get my car MOT'd. So I don't know how it is over there, but every year you basically have to take your car in and they just make sure it's not going to kill anyone, like a wheel's going to fall off or whatever. And so I was sat in the waiting room, and they had BBC News 24 on. And I was only sat there for about 10 minutes while the guy went and sort of, filled out all the paperwork and brought it back. And I left, mate, going, no wonder everyone's mental. Honestly, after 10 minutes of the BBC, no wonder everyone's crazy. Like, you would think you were in a war zone of death, and a lot of people just stayed in their house, and they literally just watched the BBC, and they thought out there was carnage, and they didn't realize that actually if they were out there, they'd just see me running to the shops for the 20th time that day. And then what happened in the summer, they lifted some of the restrictions and people started coming out and going for a drink and whatever. And then you'd have a conversation, how's it been for you the last 3 months? People go, oh, yeah. And then, do you know anyone that's died? No. Why do you? No. It's weird, isn't it? And I found that was a tagline, mate. I was using that all the time because I don't like to preach at people, because if someone preaches at me, it winds me up. So I thought, I don't want to do that. But I just find that I would just go, it's weird, isn't it? It's weird, isn't it? That you're telling me that people are dying everywhere and you know they're not. It's just weird, isn't it? And then just see the cogs going in people's heads of, well, that is weird, isn't it? Why would they do that? Yeah, why would they do that? Anyway, I'll see you later. And you can just, and I did that with a guy that runs a burrito stall down the road in Derby. And then I would come and like, a week later or whatever, buy another burrito, because burritos are amazing. But then he started telling me things. He was like, yeah, mate, I've just heard this from a relative that said X, Y, and Z. Apparently they're killing old people in the nursing homes, giving them these drugs and that. And I was going, yeah, why would they be doing that? It's weird, isn't it? And it went on and it went on and went on. And then more people started getting switched on to the fact they're being lied to. And then in the end, like, there's no way they can bring back restrictions here, mate, in England. No chance. It will not fly. It will not fly at all. And it's amazing. I've never been so proud to be an Englishman than I have been over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I was proud to see the protests that you guys were having. I was proud of the Canadian protest, the Australian. I was really surprised to see them protesting, because I saw some footage from their protest and I was like, oh, is this London? Where is it? Oh, it's Australia. So the lackluster response of Americans who are still armed during this whole thing, it was left to the rest of the world to kind of have these big protests. I mean, they tried to do like a truckers thing here, but it got squashed pretty good after the World Economic Forum dealt with the Canadian truckers. The Americans are like, oh, we'll just do that type of thing. And they kind of got all scattered, but they're not done with this. They're going to bring back pandemic 2, 3, they've told us. Bill Gates has his germ team ready, and Peter Daszak and EcoHealth, they still got a lot of projects going with DARPA that are still ongoing out to 2024, 2025. So they've got no shortage of surprises up their sleeve. But I was really pleased to see how you guys dealt with that, because a lot of people could be like, oh, this is the end. We should just fall in line, and I can't get food without a vaccine. This is crazy. And instead, you guys are like, we're going to start a business. We're going to start providing solutions. We're going to start getting more people in front of more people so that we can have this exchange of ideas. Because if we don't do that, that's exactly how they control us. They close down the pubs, the churches, any place where people might get together and be like, put 2 and 2 together. They got two, but they don't know what the other party has. When they discover it's 4 and not 5, they're going to go probably do the opposite of what they've been doing.
Exactly.
If they've been obedient and capitulating, they might now start to silently or verbally, loudly resist. And that resistance is what they're fighting in the first place. So good for you guys. It's a family affair. And I don't know of anyone else that's gone second generation. Like your dad has a substantial legacy of work, and then the second generation, what are you guys going to do? Right? Like, what are Alex Jones's kids going to do? Are they going to continue InfoWars in the future? You guys stepped up. I'm proud of you, because like Anthony Sutton's kids or Quigley's kids, or, there's all these other truth tellers, researchers, whistleblowers who have come before you guys, but I don't know anyone that's rolled it second generation. And you got a legit setup. Your production quality is kick ass. You have great content. You guys are growing in the right direction, and you got no reason to be corrupted, because you put it in the architecture of the building, not to have external people telling you what's up or approving what you can say or can't say. You'll just leave that to the platforms. And if they censor you, you put it over here now, or you take it to IPFS, and now it's there forever, and you guys are really exploring all the good options that I need to see as a white pill person to continue to be optimistic and focus on solutions and not get all tangled in the problems, man. What are some of the biggest challenges? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, that's the thing. The solution is simple. It's been simple from the beginning. If in March 2020, they said, we're going to lock you down, and you went, no, you're not. And then you carried on chatting to your mate, it was done. It was done immediately. That was it. It was over. And that was evidenced last Christmas. In the lead up to last Christmas here in the UK, they were talking about bringing back restrictions. We're going to bring back restrictions. We might have to. Infections are rising. Everyone's looking around like, what are you on about? And so what the government started doing is they were polling, like incessantly polling, trying to find out what the public opinion was. And the public opinion was, sod off. We're not going to lock down. So if you lock us down, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But I'm not locking down. I'm going to go to my mum's house for Christmas dinner, and I'm going to do it. And that, so they lost. So with that, the government came out and said, oh, we're not going to lock down this Christmas. And it's like, but you're only saying that because if you did lock down and everyone ignored it, which they would, the game's done, because it's shown the dynamic, which is that the people have the power. You have the perception of power. You know, people, you only have power if they perceive you to have power. You actually don't. As soon as they say bugger off, it's over. And so they let us have Christmas. And I made that point to a few people at the time that, you know, this is a watershed moment. This is huge. And all it's doing is it's proving the fact that if you can stand up and say no, they can't do anything. It's over because there's too many of us. But what you needed some courage. You needed some empowerment. You needed to be a little bit fearless, I guess, in some ways. And you also needed to feel like you were part of something, part of a tribe, that you weren't on your own. You know, I'll go over the top, but I need to know that you guys are coming over the top with me. If I'm on my own, I'm getting done by the fire. So that's part of what the channel and the show and all the stuff that we're trying to do is all about. That actually, the answers are really simple and they're within all of us. We just say no. But you need to feel empowered enough and have enough confidence and enough belief in the people around you and your tribe to say no. And you know, it was evidenced massively at the protests when they got bigger and they got bigger and they got bigger. People started rising, you know, and you'd often have people that would just be kind of trundling along the side of the protest, you know, towards the edge, thinking that actually, if this, you know, there's some police, if this kicks off, I'm down a side street and I'm gone. You know, all of a sudden, those same people, all of a sudden, prime place at the front of the march, the loudest ones there, like, no, this is, you know, and that's also part of what the channel is about. Is about people realizing that they're not on their own. That there are millions of us that are in this position. You know, here in the UK, the BBC are doing this documentary called Unvaccinated, right, which is just another hit piece. It's another load of nonsense. And they're saying, you know, why are 8% of the population unvaccinated? Mate, it's about 40%. What are you talking about? 8%. They want you to feel like you're in a tiny minority because they know that most people kind of want to be part of the herd a bit. I want to belong. And so that's, again, what the channel's about, and what the protests were about, I think, was about bringing people together and going, no, hell, there's millions of us, man. Like, I'm not having it, you know. And as soon as you feel the strength within you to say I'm not having it, then the game's up.
Yeah, I think it's a game of psychological warfare, and they try to psych you out. Oh, 8% of people aren't vaccinated, which in your head says, oh, so all the stores, all the airlines, they're going to mandate that. So I might as well do that. Otherwise, I'm going to lose access to society. And they get people to buy into the fear, right? And I remember this really smart guy years and years ago he talked probably for 6 hours about just the concept of fear or love. And it's a fundamental choice in this universe. And the people who want to fear, they're going to be the people we were just talking about. And the people who want to love and learn and be interested and curious and not assume that they know everything or that the authorities tell them the truth, they're actually going to get to live, right? So these people on the other side, it's not like they fear death. They actually fear living, because living comes with risk. And entrepreneurship is one who takes risk. And the calculated risk we take is that problems would be better off if we had a solution that goes with it. And at least you have choice. You know, you keep the problem or maybe you solve it, you know, and then people have the ability to choose, and that brings freedom. And it's not going to be perfect. There's always going to be some violence and scuffles because free people do those sort of things. But the totalitarian world peace they want to bring about means nobody on the planet will have a chance to resist. They won't have choice. They won't have freedom. And what we're talking about is not just something that's going to be like, it happens in our lifetime and it goes away. These people they're playing long-term transhumanism, take over the whole human species and alter the DNA forever, right? So that's why I say on our side, we got to get multi-generational too. Like, I was born into this problem. I didn't find out about it for the first 30 years, but then shit blew up in my face and I was like, whoa, something's going on here. I better do some reading. Now, at least the next generations, our kids, can have like, okay, there's a group of people, they're not so great, but it's a small group of people. It's a finite planet. Most people here are good. And if we just empower them with the tools to be self-reliant and successful, we can push back really hard. But when we're all scarcity minded, learned helplessness, oh, woe is me, victim mentality, they have total control and they're going to run rampant and ride roughshod over us. But we can take that power back the same way they removed it from our awareness. We can reintroduce it through education to people's awareness. And that's where I think like your dad's legacy of books and talks and documentaries over the years isn't lost on you. you appreciate what your old man's all about. You know what I'm saying? And I think that you guys have it's a lucky family situation where you got two brothers and a dad, and you guys are all on the same page, so to speak, geopolitically, foreign policy, right? Like if we had to talk about Palestine and open air concentration camps and the irony of World War II and why Israel was like, there's an interesting conversation there, but none of us would like get angry at each other and yell, because we're all open to like stuff we don't know, and we have a thirst for knowledge and a curiosity, and that curiosity has bubbled up or trickled down to you, man. So when did you start like getting into it, other than periphery of your dad's work? When did you say, I'm going to pick up a book and read it and try to learn something that maybe my dad doesn't know?
I've always been open to stuff. We've always been raised to question everything. But my real red pill, I think, was I used to play beach soccer many years ago, and I played for England for 5 years. And one of the tournaments we traveled to was in Israel. And so we spent about 10 days, I think it was, in Israel. And they could kind of, I didn't know that much about it. I knew that, essentially whenever you heard about Israel, Palestine, it was never good news in terms of on the television. But I didn't know that much about it. I know my dad used to get annoyed at the telly when they would be saying certain things, but you only ever pick up a bit of it. And then we went there, and it became pretty obvious straight away that their establishment was basically going to try and use this English team as, to almost kind of whitewash stuff. So we were given these guides around Jerusalem, and they told us, everything that we were supposed to hear, and, the party line. And what I was hearing and what I was seeing didn't add up and didn't tie up. And it didn't for most of the lads who weren't political in the slightest. It didn't add up to them either. And so when I got back from Israel, that was when I kind of was like, what I'm being told on my television screen by the BBC and what I have seen with my own eyes is not the same thing. And so I looked into that a lot and didn't really like what I saw, and ended up doing quite a lot of charity work with Palestinian charities and stuff. And then I off the back of that, ended up, getting some crazy accusations of anti-Semitism because I was raising money for these Palestinian charities, and I was funding terrorism, apparently, when actually I was buying school bags and food for kids. But there you go. Which led to some guy trying to get me sacked from my job. I was working as a personal trainer on the side, working for Virgin Active, and they went to the head of Virgin Active to try and get me sacked. It ended up with the police getting involved because they recommended me getting a restraining order against this guy. It was just absolutely crazy. And I was just like, this is freaking mad. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, if I'm going to attack someone, there's two places I wouldn't turn up to attack them. One's probably a building site, like with big like construction workers, and the other is a gym. Do you know what I mean? Full of guys, big guys that are lifting weights. But this guy was threatening to turn up and attack me and all this sort of stuff. I ended up having to get the police involved, and they went down and arrested him. And it was all just crazy. And so that made me look into other stuff, because it's like, right, okay, if that is nonsense, if that whole thing is nonsense, and I've been lied to such a level, and because I've tried to do something nice for kids, I'm getting attacked and labeled X, Y, and Z. Well, then what else? Do you know what I mean? What else am I being lied to about? What else can I not talk about? Oh, climate change, can't talk about that. Oh, transgenderism, can't talk about that. All right, okay, fine. The vaccines, even before COVID, couldn't talk about vaccines. And so they were just things then I'm like, okay, well, they're the things I'm going to look into then. And that's what I did. And so when COVID came along, I mean, it was like a perfect storm of nonsense. Like as soon as it happened, my attitude was, well, I'm being lied to, because I know what I'm being lied to. I've now got to work out to what end, which became quite apparent pretty quickly. What the end goal was for it, and it always comes down to control. And on a certain level, it will be money. People, he's making X amount out of his vaccines. Old Kermit the Frog arms, Bill Gates. But yeah, he is. But I don't think he cares about money. I think he's got enough of that. I don't think he's going to run out. It's deeper than that, and it's darker than that. And that kind of way of thinking was left field before. And now I think most people at least entertain the idea that there's a dark force going on. I think they will at least entertain the idea. Maybe it might take a couple of glasses of wine, but they will entertain the idea of it, which they wouldn't have done before. Which is why I think, because I believe everything happens for a reason, always have. And I believe also that they have to tell us, which is why they tell us. I mean, I don't think they want to tell us what they're doing. But I think looking back, 20, 30 years from now, we'll look back on the last 2 years as incredible in the sense that it's what brought about the downfall.
Well, yeah, it's been like a 9/11 type of event in the fact that there's a before 9/11 world and there's a post 9/11 world. In the post 9/11 world, we have the Patriot Act. We lost a whole lot of rights. We went into this war on terror, all this stuff, right? Same thing with COVID. There's a pre-pandemic world and now there's a post-pandemic world, and it kind of looks it resembles the old world, but there's so many permanent changes. And then they have like the Commons Pass and all these other, non-profit foundations driven track trace database, all living things, including people, especially people, type of agenda, right? So while we get into like it's Ukraine now on the radar or something else, they're still continuing with that agenda behind the scenes, and then it'll percolate up probably around election season in this country, And I think that's the other thing to observe. This is not like a one-time thing that they're just doing this one thing and they're going away. They've been building up to it for like 100 years, right? And when they do, in this country, Iran-Contra or the BCCI scandal, right? All the same players that grew power through those scandals are the same ones that can help flip switches for world lockdown, 208 countries in lockstep doing it like this. I knew it was real in this country when I saw the casinos and the sports teams shut down without question. I was like, oh, the fix is in. Like they must have had some meeting 6 months ago saying, when this happens, you guys all do this, because it happened so quickly, and what's the top down power to do that unless they're like, oh, we got advance notice on this gig. And they've been preparing. So when it was time for them to shut down like their access to the public, there was no big deal.
No, it was the same here. The advertising that took over every single newspaper and every single website and a mainstream website and radio station was all adverts. Now, I've got friends that work in advertising. An advertising campaign of that size and that magnitude, you're agreeing that it takes months to negotiate that and to put that in place, to book the slots and to have that all in place. And friends of mine that work in advertising, they were saying there's no way that those massive campaigns that launched in March 2020 weren't agreed in January. And they were saying that's being optimistic. That's playing devil's advocate a bit and saying maybe the government had a bit of extra sway. They knew what they were doing. And so they were, kind of getting these media companies on board early because they were funding them to the tunes of hundreds of millions of pounds. So all of a sudden you had newspapers like The Guardian, which is normally begging for donations left, right, and centre, all of a sudden was getting hundreds of millions in from the government. Well, of course they're going to tell you, to stay 2 meters apart and get your jab and all this other nonsense that the government was peddling, because it's what's funding it. It's what's paying for their entire existence. And it's interesting you say Ukraine, because I look at Ukraine situation, you look at climate change, and you look at COVID. They're the three big things at the minute, and you go, well, but what do the three of them do? They take food off your plate, they destroy the economy, and they leave people worse off than they were before. All three of them. It's basically a way of the government going, right, we want to take all of your stuff, please, and we want you to do exactly as you're told. Thank you very much. And if they did that, you'd go, no, obviously not. What do you mean? Oh no, there's a virus. Oh, okay, yeah. Have all my stuff, have all my freedoms and stuff. Oh, okay. Oh, there's food scarcity. Well, this is bad. Like, I pay this money, I pay my taxes. What do you mean there's no? Oh, there's a war. Oh, it's Russia's fault. Oh, okay, then fine. You get your way. Okay, well, what do you mean you're paying farmers not to produce food? That's insane. Yeah, but because of the nitrogen that they release, it's going to destroy the planet, and there won't be a planet. Oh, okay, yeah, take that.
You're like a Ricky Gervais act right now, dude.
But that's what it is. But it's true.
I know. I know. That's why it's funny and ironic and sad all at the same time, man. I don't know whether to laugh, cry, or wind my watch. Jesus Christ.
That's the thing. It's like kind of, if I turn on the news, I know it's going to tell me that my roof is caving in.
Yeah.
There's going to be three stories, and each one's going to say your roof's caving in, but then there's going to be a different reason why your roof's caving in.
Yeah.
Switch off.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the reason that you were so buoyant and swimming towards shore this whole time was you're not paying that TV license. You're not infecting yourself with the real virus. The media is the virus, right? People letting things into their mind that are not true is really the virus, whether they do that through assumption or ignorance, or they trusted somebody who gave them bad information and they didn't trust but verify, right? That's really what's driving a lot of the behavior and the praxeology of it. And then like the biological aspect of it, yeah, they make bioweapons. This crazy stuff. And it was going on in Ukraine too. I was incredulous about that. I was like, no way. But yeah. So between Soros messing with Ukraine for the past 20 years, or any of this stuff, it's like we're not being told anywhere near the truth. And these agendas are exactly what you just said. You just gave a checklist of how to green light a government project. If it takes food off people's tables, if it brings fear to the family, you know what I'm saying? Like that's how they get these things off the ground. It has to check all those boxes to get the green light. And it's very effective for the people who don't think for themselves. Absolutely. And that's a big group of people, but we don't need to get all the people to think for themselves. We just need a larger group of that small minority, and get it from 3% to 5% to 8% of people saying, whoa, pushing back. And then the rest of that herd will be saying, that guy's got a good point. I didn't consider that. You didn't show me that on the TV. Why not? Why don't we have informed consent? If this is all science, where's, what's going on?
Yeah, it steamrolls. It does. And you made a really good point earlier when you were talking about the fact that, to kind of launch something, you take a risk. There's a risk involved and there's a bit of self-responsibility. And I think that is a lot of the reason why people have gone along with stuff, because it puts the responsibility. If I believe the state and I just go along with what I'm told, it puts the responsibility back on the state. So for instance, take vaccines as an example. If I say, do you know what, I'm not taking the vaccine. I've not had the vaccine. I've never had one in my life. So I'm certainly not starting the COVID one. Okay, I'm not having the vaccine. Now I roll forward 4 months, right? COVID's real, it's deadly, it's really bad. I made a mistake. I'm lying there in my hospital bed, I've got a ventilator on, I'm screwed. But I'd have been saved if I'd had the vaccine, right? That's on me. That's on me. I can only blame myself for that because I made that decision. I was told by all these bobbleheads on telly to take it and I didn't. So I'm going to take that responsibility. But if I take it and it makes me ill and I lie there on the hospital bed and I've got this ventilator on and I'm struggling because of the vaccine, that's not my fault. That's Anthony Fauci's fault. And that's Matt Hancock's fault. Or that's Boris Johnson's fault. Or that's Bill Gates' fault. Or Pfizer's fault. I can put the responsibility on them rather than on myself. And I think that's a big problem that we have in society is people don't want to take responsibility for themselves. They want someone to rule them harder, someone that they can blame at a later date when it all goes wrong. And actually, it's still your fault, mate, because you had a choice.
And the only difference is, because that's a brilliant point, so I want to bring it together for the audience. The difference is that when you put the responsibility on Tony Fauci or Bill Gates, you also give them the power to be the only solution provider, and they're not going to solve your problem. So when you put the blame on someone other than yourself, you also take away your ability to solve that problem. Only when you take self-responsibility can you then get solutions to the problem, right? So it's a balancing act of ego. We need ego to get up and take those risks and see that thing that could be, but if we do some hard work, we can make it actually be. We need ego to do that. But we also need ego to be our amigo. And if ego is there preventing us from making connections or getting in our way of getting things done, right? So we got to put it in check. It shouldn't be driving, but maybe it's in the back seat. It's not our navigator, but maybe it chimes in now and then and says, you're not done yet. You can get up and keep going. No one, these sort of motivational things, right? So there's like a positive element, there's a negative element. We are not taught these things in Western society whatsoever. Knowledge of self traditionally has been something so useful to controlling people that they only have people in secret societies go through. So you're getting somebody's brand or flavoring of the knowledge of self experience, right? But in the 21st century, a lot more people are getting in touch with their creator, their higher self, however you want to say it. They're having a communication union without an intermediary, without placebos. They're actually, having psychedelic experiences that help them get to know their ego, blow away their ego, come back from that, be like, whoa, I'm still here. Have that whole, what I call adulting experience, like the rites of passage to become an adult were removed. So now they just have people in extended adolescence. So in their 60s, they're still acting like they're in high school. That's how they control most of the society. So congratulations for not being born into that mold and having to break out. You had a little head start on most people, but you're paying it back, man. You're paying it back and not just saying, I got some perspective, I'm going to use it and go off by myself. You're coming back saying, I got perspective, and knowledge only becomes wisdom when you share it. And you guys have like a wisdom sharing conduit that you're stuffing out there right now at a time when all the other types of media are drying up. You're like, we got a well with plenty and it's overflowing. Come get some.
Yeah, there's so much knowledge out there that is either censored or ignored, that would change people's lives. And I think, because of COVID, I think COVID is kind of backfired on them a bit, because, okay, you destroy people's livelihoods and all that sort of stuff, but you also lock them up in their houses. Now, a lot of people just then, just went through the bottle of vodka, but a lot of others went, well, actually, I've got a bit of extra time that I didn't have now. I'm going to do some reading, or I'm going to do some researching. I'm going to start watching some documentaries that I never had time to watch before because I'm always working. And so actually a lot more people became empowered and kind of asked a few more questions, and went down rabbit holes. I mean, I know loads of people that went down YouTube rabbit holes, what's left of those videos on YouTube at least, during those lockdown periods, that would never have done that before because they'd have never had time to do it. So in a sense, I think they've kind of almost built an army that will bring them down, because the other thing is as well, the more they destroy people, I think as long as people are okay, like, unfortunately, there is that almost inherent selfishness within people that if I'm all right, Jack, I'm okay, it's fine. Because all I really want is make sure my kids are okay, my wife's okay, we're all sorted. So most people, when they're in a situation of being okay, I feel bad for you guys, but my hot tub's about to overflow. So I'm kind of, we're all right. Whereas the more people you destroy, you create people that have nothing left to lose, because, well, I've lost everything. So what am I going to do? Am I going to go and cry about it? Or what's that going to get me? Well, I'm going to fight back. And so I feel very much now that, they've inadvertently created an army of people that have got nothing left to lose. And that's the last person you want to fight. I'm not into boxing, but if I had to go in the ring with someone, that's the last person I'd want to fight, would be someone that's got nothing left to lose. Because he would just keep getting back up.
Yeah, that's a real lesson in life too, right? Because we're softer than the person with nothing left to lose, and we should also know that, right? The people we're up against, they're not people with nothing left to lose, but the people on our side we're among those people now, right? And I agree with you. They tried to condense their agenda and do it ahead of time to like slam the door on this whole thing. So they like took 2030 and they pushed it 10 years ahead, and they tried to force it on people. And some people took it and other people were like, no, thanks. And now the people that so they made some progress. They made a lot of progress. They got a whole bunch of check marks on their agenda moving forward with globalism. However, the people that you woke up that weren't going to wake up very easily, they're awake now for the rest of their life. You're going to have to starve them to death or something, because they're not going to forget easily what you just did in the open and bragging about it. World Government Summit, World Economic Forum, Davos. We're doing this. They called the pandemic a product of theirs. There's a clip from the World Government Summit or the World Economic Forum Davos, I forget, because they both got blue backgrounds. And she's like, yeah, it was the most successful product of the year is the pandemic and all that comes with it, all that wealth redistribution that came with that pandemic. So they're openly saying the quiet part out loud, saying, we are actively shaping your world, not just planning to do it in the future like they used to do. And then we roll into that plan. They're just doing it now, real time. They're like, you've all Noah Harari's like, we're under your skin. We're going to track, trace, database your whole life and forget about freedom, forget about humanity, right? They're playing God. And they can only do that if they assume that God doesn't exist in the first place. And then I'd go back to your statement of where you say, you think there's meaning in things. And my argument would be, if there's meaning, if there's science and we can dig down and find answers, then consciousness put that stuff there in the first place, and we should wake up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So go ahead.
I think that there are forces at work for good and for evil in this. Now, people then get bogged down in kind of an organized religion way of looking at, oh, does that mean you're a this or you're a that? Well, I'm not involved with any organized religion, but I think there's a force at work for good as well as a force at work for evil. Now, you can put a label on that as much as you want. You can call it God, you can call it Allah, you can call it Jeff. I ain't bothered. But there's something there for sure. And I kind of think about that at times. when it gets hard, because, you know, even people like me and you that are fighting against this, I'm sure, you know, I know I've woken up in the morning over the last 2 years like, fuck, you know, I'm struggling today with this, man. I'm struggling today. But then deep breath, you feel it, there's something, you know, there's some support there from somewhere, and then you can go again. And you know, I live by that for sure. Absolutely. Just not with a, you know, religious tag on it.
Yeah, that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And as long as we keep getting up one more time than we fell down, we're going to be fine.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, you win some, you learn some, for sure.
All right. Well, I know your time's valuable. I want to let you get back to, you got family time coming up. So how can people get in touch with the Ickonic Media Network? What's the offer? How do they click the button and do the thing?
So it's just ickonic.com, which is ickonic.com. And the homepage there will just prompt you to click for a 7-day free trial. So you click in, and then for 7 days, enjoy the channel. There's loads of weekly shows, news shows, documentaries, films. There's some comedy on there, plenty of podcasts as well, like visual podcasts. There's some different series, things about nature of reality. There's walking series on there. There's pretty much, you know, there's yoga series on there. There's cooking series on there. There's something for everyone, really. I think, you know, you'll struggle to get through the channel in 7 days. That's for sure, because there's thousands of hours of stuff. But hopefully, you know, you'll be able to find something that you enjoy, and you know, kind of, you know, empowers you, makes you feel better about yourself.
Yeah, it's a habit of empowering yourself with meaningful, substantial, relevant information. You know, positioning it in your life, integrating it toward your goals, and finding value from Ickonic on a recurring basis, right? You're not going to get through everything in the 7-day trial. So go ahead, dip in and watch a little right now. Yeah. That's where you're the host, right?
That's it. Yeah. And we put the prices down now. So it's $7.99 a month. Like we were kind of, we were $9.99 a month, $9.99. It's easy for me to say, a month. And then we were looking, you know, you're looking at the way the world is at the minute, and, you know, everything's getting more expensive and everyone's struggling. And while everyone was putting their prices up to kind of come in line with inflation and stuff, we're looking at it like, well, people are struggling, so we'll go the other way. So it's cheaper now than it was before. So hopefully that will, you know, again, you know, provide people with a bit more quality, you know, kind of value for money. Because I know people say, oh yeah, but by putting the prices cheaper or putting it down, you're devaluing the product. And it's like, that sounds like management talk, and I'm, you know, it's not for me. So hopefully it's more accessible to more people now, which is the idea, obviously.
All right, fantastic. We're going to post a link for ickonic.com in the show notes and in the community, and people get yourself over there, get that 7-day trial, and let him, you know, let the network speak for itself. You click a few buttons, you get value, you keep going. You click a few buttons, you don't get value, you stop. That's all. We're all adults here. Thank you, Gareth, for taking time out of your busy schedule. And I look forward to talking to you again. Keep up the great work. And yeah, fantastic production value. And that's how you hold people's attention. It's the production value plus the content and the magnetism of that knowledge. That's where you guys really have something special here.
Thanks, Richard. It's really kind of you, mate. And this has been great to chat. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man.